Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Every Calorie Counts podcast. So again, today we have a topic that we kind of just came up with immediately before recording. And it's a topic that I feel like everyone is always very interested in. Everyone wants to talk about it. And I kind of came up with it because we were on a live with Steve Metropolis. We've had him on the podcast recently, like a few episodes back.
Yeah, something like
Probably
that.
more than a few. You guys can check that out. But we were all on a live together, and something that just always comes up, and Tim and Steve always do lives, is drugs, PEDs. Everyone always wants to talk about that. So today we're gonna talk about that. I think it is a good thing to talk about when to start if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about taking that next step, taking the next leap in your journey. So yeah.
Yeah. So as per usual, right? The last second idea comes up. And now we're just rolling with it. And right before we hopped on this too, Marina said, you said, should we have some sort of structure to this? And as per usual, we decided we're just gonna wing it.
Yeah.
So bear with us. But I think the best place to start here is essentially just the answer to the question that you just posed, like, when is somebody in a position where they should start to think about anabolic usage or maybe using performance enhancing drugs. And I think,
Mhm.
if actually, you know what, maybe we should classify first performance enhancing drugs to a certain
Okay.
extent,
Yeah.
right? Seriously, why not? Because
Yeah.
before we get to the point of, like, hey, like what is the right time? It's almost like, okay, well, what classification of drug are we looking at, right?
Mhm.
Because there might be some people that aren't, competitors necessarily, but they're looking to put their body in a position where it's going to maximize, where they're looking to maximize their outcomes there. And they're
Yeah.
maybe willing to, take a step into that performance enhancement realm to be able to maximize their end outcome, or maybe just support their process to
Hmm.
maximizing their end outcome. And they need a little bit more maybe like
Support.
resilience. Yeah, I guess but I would say even more so, again, with women, maybe it's a little bit more resilience. With men, maybe it's a little bit more support as it relates to, like, managing their daily life and being able to get into the gym and train regularly, getting a little bit more oomph back, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, I think, again, we automatically jump to, androgens when we're talking about performance enhancing drugs. Like, it's steroids, it's
Hmm.
testosterone, it's Anavar, it's, these types of things, right? But there is an entire classification of drugs that are non-androgenic, right? That could play a huge role in terms of
Hmm.
somebody's progress, whether it relates to bodybuilding or just enhancing the overall physique. And in some cases, it might be genuinely, or generally, I should say, beneficial for somebody, like an L-carnitine, like a metformin, like telomestartan, like these things that could have entirely positive health outcomes, right, or health benefits, right? But again, we are, for all intents and purposes, in these cases, using them to drive performance
Hmm.
increases, right? Or drive the ability to be able to consume more food, right?
Hmm.
Or just drive, being able to maintain a certain internal environment while we are pushing a lot of food, while we are training really hard, while we are still living the rigors of life, right? So there are an entire group of drugs that probably should be considered here, right? Or that could be considered initially by a lot of people, whether, again, that be something as maybe like thought of as quote unquote egregious, like growth hormone, insulin,
Yeah.
right? Or even clenbuterol, which
Yeah.
has a very real effect on somebody at that particular moment, like an acute effect in terms of the side effect, right? That you can get sped up, heart rate, starting to sweat a little bit, these different types of things. But again, has a very real physical outcome in terms of losing body fat, strength, anabolism, right?
Hmm.
And then we have these things that are maybe a little bit less quote unquote egregious, like the L-carnitine, like metformin, like telomestartan. They could all be used in some sort of general health, phase for somebody, as much as they could be used in a growth phase for somebody or a fat loss phase for somebody, right? Like, they're going to have their benefits too. And then we can kind of cross that bridge into the more, like, I don't know how I'd put it, the more intense, right?
Yeah.
I guess the
Well,
more aggressive,
higher risk, I
versions.
guess.
Higher risk is a good way of putting it, but higher risk, higher reward,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Testosterone, like, and that probably be a good thing to kind of emphasize here is the reality. Like once we get into testosterone, which would kind of be our base concept there as far as androgen is concerned, and then we
Mhm.
start looking at things like the MPPs, the primos, the 19 orthodeca, any type of oral that somebody wants to, whatever, right? These androgens, right, is what we're looking at there. Essentially, what we're going to get out of that is more risk, but
Mhm.
far more real world outcomes in terms of muscle development. All these things that we talked about previous, while they are much safer, we have to realize that when it comes down to effects from these drugs, we can
Mhm.
kind of group muscle development and side effects together to a certain extent, right? Where it's like, hey, as you start to push the threshold of these compounds, whether it is the type of compound or the amount of
Mhm.
compound that you're taking within one classification, the reality is side effects can become more prevalent, but as side effects become more prevalent, the muscle development effect of a drug is going to become more prevalent. So as
Mhm.
we're trying to stay safer and we're looking at different classifications of drugs, we have to understand the side effects might be much less, but we also have to have proper expectations around the actual effect of building muscle, burning fat, performance enhancement. Those are going to be much less too, right? So in other words, for a female, if I put you on 2 IUs of growth hormone, you're not going to see this dramatic impact, right? You might not feel, you're probably not going to feel, you won't feel a dramatic impact on a day-to-day basis, right? Maybe your sleep's a little bit better, maybe your hair and skin health start to get a little bit better, maybe your fat loss over time is a little, but again, these are things that are probably going to take a little bit of time for you to understand and or even comprehend, and it might be in more of a retroactive thought process as opposed to in the moment thought
Yeah.
process. In other words, you're not going to wake up after one night of growth hormone and be like, wow, I slept really well. It might be
Yeah.
something where like 3, 4, 5 days in, you're recognizing, you know what? My sleep has been that much better. So
Yeah.
again, the acute nature of these drugs, right? When we're taking them at a safer amount and or a safer classification of drugs, the reality is the outcomes that we're getting from them in real time in terms of the outcomes we're looking for, right, are going to be much more moderate, just the same way the side effects are going to be much more moderate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So but now it's, again, when we cross that bridge, though, the other thing, vice versa is true too. If
Yeah.
you put somebody on, whatever, 6 milligrams of a TRT dosage of drugs for a female, in terms of testosterone, you are going to feel that. Is it going to be something that's crazy where you're going to probably wake up in 2 days with a huge clit? No, right? Are you going to wake up the next day and sound like your husband? Like, no. But at the end of the day, again, there is more risk of those things,
Yeah.
potentially happening to some extent over time, right? But you're also going to, within those first couple of weeks of taking TRT, you're going to notice your libido goes up, right? Your vitality goes up in general. So, like the amount of, you'll be a little bit more, I don't even want to use the word aggressive. You'll have more of like an alpha mentality where it's like you're ready, like less anxiety, less depression, ready to go, like tackle the day, having better training outcomes, feeling more even like positive and like,
Hmm.
just capable and ready on a day to day, right? Like those are things that you're actually going to get from that 6 milligram dosage of TRT. And I'm just throwing out that number. I don't know where the fuck
Yeah.
it came from, probably a conversation we were at. But nonetheless, 6 milligrams of TRT, again, you're going to get that benefit from it right away, those feelings from it right away. But there is potential things that you need to look out for there versus, again, the point that I'm trying to make here, the 2 IUs of growth hormone that you're not really going to feel, you're not really going to notice an immediate difference from, but you also don't have these immediate things that you have to be so concerned with either. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
again, now we have that kind of clarified. It's like, okay, so when does somebody start getting into these things, right?
Yeah.
Are we at that point now? We feel good getting into that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you set that up really, really well. But I think the number, I think you can agree, but like the number one thing that someone needs to get in order before taking that next step, whether it is um the side of, I guess, not as I don't want to say aggressive, but less risk PEDs versus our androgens. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, even for those less risk ones, it's just having your ducks in a row and still, being able to perform at your highest ability and doing what you need to do day to day, basic, like the basic things that you need to be doing to facilitate either muscle growth or fat loss, whatever the goal is. That being diet, that being training with intensity, training hard, being on top of your nutrition, like, yeah, like diet, but like nutrition as well, meaning like micronutrients, whatever. And then sleep, of course. So all those things I think are super important to have down pat first, before adding anything in, because then that thing is not going to be able to do, it's not going to do much to begin with. If we're talking about the less risk PEDs, they're not gonna, it's not a magic pill. They're like, yeah, you're still taking a PED, yeah, we're still gonna have those like differences like when you take things, but it's not going to be something crazy. And if you don't have that basis of the lifestyle down, of getting your shit done, doing your job, doing your part, those things are not going to do anything. So that is number one for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say, I think, to just to follow up on that, I think when people start to think, and this is a common conversation I have with people, right? Because sometimes, we'll recommend something where the name on it is like sexy and alluring, like the Shredder, right?
Yeah,
Or which is a carnitine blend that we get from Amino Asylum, or like Stampede, which is another carnitine blend that we get. And it's like people automatically think like, and then they're injecting this stuff, right? Like
yeah,
carnitine, for it to have
yeah,
its best
quarantine
effect, it needs
injectable.
to be injected, right? So people think automatically it's like, I'm injecting something. It's called the Shredder. I'm going to
Yeah,
get this
I'm gonna
amazing
get
like result from
shredded.
this thing. Yeah, this thing's going to change the way my body looks, all this different
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like, no, that's not the way this works at all. It's going to enhance your performance, right? And I think the number one thing that we can say here is, whenever you're touching any of these things, but specifically you touch on the idea of like these lesser aggressive or initial classification of drugs, which is, performance enhancing drugs that aren't androgens, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even when we get into that level of things, right, where people are like, oh, I'm going to take this and finally I'm going to get that result. It's like, no, these are more accumulative drugs, right?
Yeah.
In other words, they are going to work in a way where they accumulate a result over time through enhancing your performance, right? So they don't generate higher levels of, or I shouldn't say it like that, I guess. They're not going to make you stick to your diet. They're not going to
Yeah.
overcome your diet. They're not going to make you train harder, right? They're not going to teach you how to train to failure if you haven't started to train to failure yet, right? Like they're not going to be something that is going to make up. All they're going to do is enhance what you're already doing. So if
Mm-hmm.
what you're already doing isn't good enough to get a result, right? And you think, well, hey, I just need drugs to get the result that I'm looking for, you're fucking wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the drugs aren't going to enhance what you're already not doing, right? Or what you're not doing yet, right? So you need to learn how to be 100% immaculate on your diet and not be the person that's like, well, I was pretty good with my diet, but then I went out on Friday with my friends and I just had a few drinks. I tried to keep
Mm-hmm.
it clean. It's like, well, dude, you don't really need drugs. You just need to, like, that one meal in your week can still be maximized, right? And I know some
Mm-hmm.
people might be like, one meal in my week, I can't have a free. It's like, well, now you're about to turn the corner and start taking drugs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we should probably be able to be in a situation for at least a period of time to be 100% in our nutrition at all fucking times,
Yeah.
100% of the meals that you're consuming before we decide to turn the corner and start taking drugs, right? Because how could you be certain of what your natural, capabilities are,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're not going to that extent naturally yet, right? Like you got to get you. So all those things have, and then again, I would always make the argument too that like if you want to use something that's going to enhance your performance and get the highest outcomes from it, that you should be doing the highest level shit possible to be able to get those highest level outcomes from these things before you start doing them, right?
Yeah.
Again, they are performance enhancing drugs, right? I come from an era when we didn't even use the word PEDs yet, right? Like the word PEDs were rarely used at that point. It was more like, gear, steroids, like that type
Mm-hmm.
of stuff, right? This is still common. Again, it's
Mm-hmm.
just verbiage. Who cares? But my point here is just saying that, like, we didn't recognize it as performance enhancing drugs back then. We recognize them as supplements that make you grow a lot of fucking muscle, that make you
Yeah.
really fucking strong. Right. So we would legitimately go on cycles where we just start taking a supplement, right, or a drug at a relatively high dosage, right? And we would take it for a short period of time with the full comprehension that, hey, this dosage of drug over this duration of time, it's going to end up starting to cause some side effects. By the time I get to said point, sometimes it was 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever it was, right? And as those side effects start to, accumulate, I'm going to have to come off this drug and I'm going to go on to something called post-cycle therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
My point behind giving you that whole thing is that essentially we just use these drugs to build muscle, right? Somewhere along the way, we started to get smarter because what happened with those cycles on and off is we would end up putting on some muscle tissue because we were really good for that period of time while we
Yeah.
were on the drug because we were extra motivated, right? Then we would come off that drug. We wouldn't have the same oomph in the gym. Our numbers would be going down, whatever the case
Mm-hmm.
might be. And some people would really tail off their training at that point, tail off their diet at that point. And what would happen is we'd get this massive effect. We'd put on whatever, 12, 15 pounds, whatever, during that 16-week cycle that we did, 500 milligrams of testosterone and whatever, fucking 200 milligrams of Deca or whatever the hell it was, right? And then in that off cycle, right, we'd probably lose fucking, 12 to 15 pounds of the weight that we put on. All of our performance in the gym went down, and it would just be this vicious cycle of kind of chasing this thing, right? Because again, we
Hmm.
were only motivated and working really hard while we were on that cycle. Then somewhere along the way, we got smarter, right? Realized like, hey, maybe we should take a lot smaller dosage, right, for a much longer period of time and just be really good at everything that we're doing for that longer period of
Hmm.
time. Right. And people are like, you'd be surprised how much results you can get at a lower dosage of testosterone. It's like, whoa, dude, are we talking about a lower dosage of testosterone? Or are we talking about people just being better for longer periods of time with the entirety of their process that's really generating these outcomes? You know what I mean? And it was
Exactly.
always one of those things to me where it's like, are we talking about like a safer use model here? Which again it is, but are we talking about these different things? Or are we talking about people just being better more year round now
Hmm.
because we're on
Hmm.
that drug year round, and it's like, we always have something there. It's kind of like motivating, inspiring, pushing the training session, continually enhancing performance. And now the way that we look at cycles is more, okay, we're here for this whatever 16 20 week block, whatever it is, and now what we're doing is we're adding a little bit of drug there, we're adding a little bit of drug here, we're adding a little bit of drug there, and what that's doing is allowing us to increase our performance, increase our performance, increase our performance. So we're taking what we're already doing now and we're adding a little bit to it to drive that performance up. Then we're taking a little bit more to drive that performance up. Then we're taking a little bit more to drive that performance up, so on and so forth, right? And it just makes a little bit more sense when you start to look at things from a performance enhancement
Yeah.
standpoint, right? And that goes all the way back to where this conversation led or where this conversation started, right? To the reality of like, hey, if you're not performing at a high level, what the fuck are you enhancing?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And since you talked a lot about the androgens too, I feel like the other side of preparation or something that you have to think about when, I guess, crossing that line going into the androgen PEDs, the androgen side of things, is just like mentally, at least for a female, I mean, for guys too, mentally, doing your research, but also I guess being okay with the risks that may come, with the side effects that may come. That is something huge that I think maybe previously, like in the past, people, I don't know, like your age when you started, would just start shit like it's like just recreationally, that's the word.
Yeah.
Like for fun. Is they would play with it when it's like, no, like there are real considerations. Like, are you actually ready to like take on potential risks, take on potential side effects, especially for females, it being much a greater risk, I think, with virilization and stuff. Is
Well, it goes both ways, right? Like as much
Yeah,
as virilization is a thing for women, because of the amount difference, right? Like the dosage is going to be dramatically different. Again,
yeah.
a TRT dosage for a male, we're talking 125, 100 milligrams of test, right? As kind of like a normal TRT dosage, whereas a normal TRT dosage for a female might only be, 4 milligrams of testosterone. So right there, you can see that 4 milligrams to 100 plus milligrams for a male at just a baseline, hey, I want to replace my natural level type of
Hmm.
dosage, right? But then when you're talking about, blasting again, what are we talking about for a female? Like 70 milligrams of a particular drug at the high end, where for a male, we're going up to a gram, 1,000 milligrams of a particular drug. So again, when it comes to some of the side effects for a male, we're still looking at, kidney issues. We're looking at, cardiovascular issues. We're looking at, some of the more honestly life-threatening side effects,
Yeah.
right? But for a female, because the dosage is so minimal, it can still have very real life-altering effects
Hmm.
in terms of our sexual health, in terms of our voice, in terms of some of the things that we have to kind of walk around and wear
Hair
on a
growth.
day-to-day basis as a
Yeah.
female. What's that?
Hair growth.
Oh, hair growth. I saw you said in your throat. I
Uh-huh.
guess, yeah. But the bottom line is, you're still going to have to wear that for the rest of your life to some extent. It is non-reversible, right? So the reality is they're both very much concerns, because again, one, you're talking about, legitimate potential for death or sickness,
Yeah.
right? Where and the other one, it's not death, it's not sickness, but again, you have to wear this thing that you changed on your body or in the way that you're presenting yourself for the rest of your life. Are you going to die? No. But again,
Hmm.
now you have a much deeper voice, right?
Yeah.
That people are probably going to be considerate of, right? For the rest of your life. So again, there's side effects for both parties and they're different, but at the same time, they're very genuinely real, impactful. I don't think one's really worse than the other.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Because like I guess I didn't think like yeah no death literally like heart attack and just you die for men. Especially when
Yeah.
you take that much stuff.
So, well, what you were saying? What were you saying? You were essentially saying like for the
The
considerations that you're
risks, like
making.
so
Yeah, the risk.
mentally accepting that or coming to terms with that. Like
Yeah, like
I
having
don't know.
that conversation
I think
with
it was
whoever you're working with.
I think it was Sister Nino who said this on one podcast that he was on. He was like, yeah, the day I decided to take drugs, I'm signing away years off of my life. And I was like, oh my God, like the way that if you think about it, like that is literally you have to mentally accept that as a man.
I would just say my only counter to that though is there's so many people that are doing so many things where they're signing away years to their life where they don't even
That's true.
contemplate it, right? Where it's like, hey, I want to have a job where I'm making two hundred
I
and
was
fifty
just gonna
thousand
say a
dollars a
high
year.
stress
That's
job.
great, but you're signing off years of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I want to fucking enjoy a thing of Ben and Jerry's every night before I go to bed. It's like, okay, cool, but you're signing away years of your life potentially.
That's a
Hey, I
good
want to
point.
be a guy, yeah, I want to make my own beer in my garage, and I'm a huge beer fan, and I love drinking beer, and I'll do it 3 or 4 days a week. I don't have a problem drinking, but okay, cool, but you're probably signing off years of your life. You know what I mean? Like, there's very, very, like, I don't know. You could make some shit up like that for a lot of different things. And again, a lot more potential risk factors it relates to the drugs, but then you also have to factor in again lifestyle considerations around that. Is the guy eating Ben and Jerry's, right, or the guy that has a $250,000 a year job? I think it's a perfect one, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
people, probably wouldn't even recognize that as a negative,
But
health
that's so
outcome.
real. Like men
Yeah,
that are CEOs, they die by 60. Like they have heart attacks. That's
yeah,
it.
and then and again, because think about again the other life factors that are included with an individual like that, and the decisions they're making to have that two hundred and fifty
Yeah.
thousand dollar a year income. The reality is you're probably not eating very well. You're
Yeah.
stressed to the gills 24/7, right? Like you're on the go all the time, right?
Mhm.
Like do you even have any like fucking food in your refrigerator when you get home? Like do you have any family around you potentially because you're so busy working all the time?
Yeah.
Like all these things are integral factors to our overall health outcomes. Whereas somebody that is deciding to take drugs, they're doing that, but they're also, eating really
Eating
well now.
well.
They are working
They're
out
on
and
top of their
moving on a day to
sleep.
day. They're
Yeah.
taking supplements to be able to support their general health, right? Yeah, they
That's
are
true.
on top of their sleep. So again, you do it's kind of one of those things where it's weird in that sense, right? And it's kind of like
When you put
maybe
it
like
that way, it's
people
healthier just to be a bodybuilder.
well, see, but that's the thing. That's the thing. Like people can look at that and easily. Like the argument against that is like, dude, that's hypocrisy. Like that's like not hypocrisy. I guess like that's bias. It's
Yeah.
like again, you're going to cherry pick that because somebody could turn around and say, maybe a $250,000 CEO does have the income, right, to be able to put more back into their life. It doesn't mean that just
Yeah.
because you're a CEO, you eat like shit, you live this just a stressful life. Like that's a decision that you get to make on a day to day
Exactly.
basis, right? Again, I'm just throwing out that there's these things that we have to consider on both ends of the spectrum, no matter what, right? It's not this one is doom and gloom and the other one is
Yeah.
sunshine and rainbows, right?
Yeah. I
So
would were you gonna say something?
no, I was just gonna say when it comes to the different risk factors, it's like that is something that you want to be privy to. That is something you want to educate yourself on,
Yeah.
and that is something where you also want to have the proper perception of, you know, if you're choosing now again that other classification of drugs, kind of getting back into the different right versus androgens, right, and you're looking at one because you're like, well, now they're saying this one I'm probably going to have less potential risk factors, right? Well, you also have less potential outcomes from that, like we
Hmm.
discussed too. So, like, what is the overall goal that you're trying to attain, right? What are the considerations we need to make from a health perspective? Like, if I'm a female and I'm saying, hey, I am not risking voice deepening at all, I'm not willing to risk that ever in my entire life. Then it's like, okay, well, you probably want to stay away from androgens. But
Hmm.
that same female might be, well, I want to be on the Miss Olympia stage,
Yeah. I
or
was
I
just
want to
gonna get
have
into
a
that. Yeah.
six pack, yeah, or I want to have a six pack,
Like
or
your
I want to whatever
expectations, your goals, and like where you want to be
really
is
high.
different. Like it plays a part in
You have
then
to,
again choosing what you're taking. And I think there is also another level, like you mentioned, when so if we're just going to talk about competitors here, like I think it's a different level when you're trying to turn pro. It's a different level when you're trying to win a pro show. It's a different level when you want to go to the Olympia, and it's all like I think it's goal dependent, expectation dependent. So like you said, if someone's like,
well,
okay, what?
I was just gonna say it's got to be a consideration of both. Like that's where you
Yeah.
have to have the conversation where it's like, hey, listen, if your goal is to, you never want to have voice deepening at all, right? And like you don't want to, you could never live with an enlarged clit in any way, shape, or form, or like, hey, my libido's too high and I can't live my life like this for whatever, right? Then it's like, okay, well, here's your classification of drugs. We're talking GH, we're talking insulin, we're talking, carnitine, clen, whatever we talked about before, telmisartan, metformin, blah, 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 right? We have this classification of drugs. But your comprehension has to be, hey, if I'm on GH and insulin, as much as that seems like a crazy combination, insulin can kill, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be people who listen to
Mm.
this right now, like, insulin for a female, like it always happens. We know it's there. But again,
Yeah.
insulin's a very applicable drug in this scenario, right? GH, a very applicable drug in this scenario, right? If you are stuck within that classification of drug that's going to be like at its highest level from a muscle development standpoint, growth and insulin, right? Because of what you're not willing to risk over here, you have to understand that growth in insulin, again, because that's kind of at the top of the food chain at these lower risk concepts, right? As far as muscle development is concerned, growth and insulin are not going to relate to, right, having this dramatic difference within even the first 12 months of use, let's say. Right. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be this huge dramatic thing where now you go from, hey, I'm I don't know, let's just make an example here out of this, right? Like I'm taking third or fourth place at a local NPC show in whatever division I'm in, right? Now I'm going to take growth and insulin with all these other things immaculate that we've already talked about, right? I already
Mm-hmm.
have my diet immaculate, already have my training immaculate, already have my sleep and all these other lifestyle factors immaculate. Now I add in growth and insulin. Is that enough to be able to, turn that fourth or third place finisher into a first place finisher? I don't, not in every case, not in every case, not
Yeah.
in every case. I mean, we don't know realistically, but it's not going to be enough in every case to see this huge dramatic difference where it's like, well, I'm taking growth hormone, I'm taking insulin, I'm injecting myself every day. It's like, okay, cool. But again, safety, right, is going to relate back into less overall effect from the drug, right? Less
Mm-hmm.
overall effect from the drug,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at the end of the day, we have to just take that into consideration as it relates to the expectations that we have around this drug usage. So at that point, for somebody, it might beg the question, is it worth it to use
Mm-hmm.
this substance at all? Right?
Yeah.
If it's not going to get me the outcome that I want, right? And I'm not willing to give up these things as far as my health is concerned, or as far as my appearance or representation of my physique is concerned, right? Or self is concerned, right? Then is it worth taking these drugs at all? And again, that's a question for the individual,
Yeah.
right? But I do think it's opening up just like an interesting, like, kind of concept and dynamic and questions here where it's like, hey, again, we do have these, kind of like lower risk options, right? Non-androgenic things that I think a lot of people become a little bit more open to, right? I know
Mm-hmm.
that for a fact. I have clients that are open to L-carnitine. I have clients that are open to Clen. I have clients that are
Yeah.
open to all these things. But the
Yeah.
one thing that I try to explain to all of them before we start to supplement with these things or create some sort of a plan around these things, right, in terms of enhancing their performance, is like, hey, these are only going to enhance your performance, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
performance is going to be indicative more so of what you're already doing, how hard you're working, right? Being able to maintain that at a certain level and then being able to push that up just a little bit with this drug. So it's not going to be this giant thing that's like, carnitine's a fat burner. It's like, don't even think about it like that. Like,
Yeah.
don't even have that in your mind that you're going to start to take this and burn more fat. Like, you might not even be in a position from a calorie standpoint, a calorie deficit standpoint, to be able to lose any fat right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you're
Yeah.
not going to put on as much fat going forward. That's great. But again, we're using this specifically based on its mechanism of action, like how it's working in the body, right? And the impact that that's going to have on driving better performance outcomes. So all it's doing is making what you're already doing that much more efficient, right? But when was the last time that doing what you were doing led to some sort of like crazy result, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way, right? If you want one of these crazy results, like there's this guy on YouTube that I've seen recently, right? I actually had no effing clue who it was. I saw a clip of on Instagram, and I looked him up because he was literally talking about. I follow Troponin Nutrition is fuck. Why can't I think of
Chipotle
his name right?
nutrition.
Troponin Nutrition.
Oh,
Yeah, TRO Troponin Nutrition, I think is
troponin.
what it is. But he's a well-known coach. I forget what his name is off the top of my head. He's been around for forever. He's actually like a fucking legit scientist too, like nuclear physicist, I think is
Oh
what his
shit.
actual thing is. Yeah, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He's been around for forever, like literally for forever. But anyway, bottom line is
Justin
he had him on his
Harris.
podcast. Yeah, there you go, Justin Harris. Justin had him on his podcast. This guy, his name's Chase Irons, right? And I just saw a clip on Instagram where he's talking about doing 18 IUs of growth hormone a day. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that can't be fucking real. So I got sucked into the clickbait, checked him out on Instagram. This dude is legitimately, I'm not exaggerating. He went from like this, like the transformation is crazy. It's insane.
Mhm.
But again, in order to get there, I think he said he was taking 5,000 milligrams of test a week, right? And he was legitimately taking between something like
Wait, so
15 to
5
20 units of
grams a
growth
test
a day. Yeah,
a
and I think
week,
that was like,
a week.
yeah, and I think there, but I think there was also Masteron involved there too. Like, I don't think it was just 5,000 milligrams of test, but yes, there was literally thousands of milligrams of test going in. There was other drugs going in, but regardless, 5,000 milligrams of test a week is a lot, right? It's a lot, right? But 18 IUs of growth hormone in a day is fucking insane. That
It's
is
also
insane.
expensive as
That is
fuck.
nuts. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he's literally so he's got this huge following, right? And I'll guarantee you, like literally all of the money that he's taking in from this following is probably getting funneled back into that drug usage. But again, it's probably getting him a good ROI on the other end because now he's able to make content around all that drug he's taking. You know what I mean? And it's like from what it looks like he's doing, like it seemed like he had blood work on file that was really good, all this different stuff. I don't know, right? I'm not here to all I'm saying is that guy has this crazy ass transformation where he went from like a normal looking dude that goes to the gym to being a huge jack motherfucker, right? But again, it's costing him not just financially. I'm saying it's
Yeah.
costing him the intake of all this drug. So, right, like all I'm saying is what you're trying to get out of this, let's be realistic about this, right? At the same time, where it's like, again, come back to the conversation where it's like, is this really worth it for you, right? Is it really worth it for you in terms of what you're actually going to get? I would say one of the biggest things that I would tell somebody to do here before they start taking drugs is have a conversation with somebody back about what these drugs are going to do, because again, even if you go to the more aggressive side of things in terms of these androgens, you accept the side effects. Are you willing, are you ready to accept the reality of what you're actually going to be getting out of this, right? I wasn't ready for it when I was younger, right? When I decided to start taking steroids, I legitimately had the thought process that I just wasn't taking enough. I need to take more. I need to take more. I need to take more. I'm lucky that I always had this kind of like limit that I was willing to go to, right? I don't even think it was a limit, more so than I was just scared. You know what I mean? I was legitimately scared to go above a certain amount, and that was it, right? But I also had to recognize relatively early on that it's like, hey, dude, you did do this, you did go to that limit, right? This was the outcome from it. Why am I getting such a minimal outcome from things that other people are saying they do and they're 250 pounds, yet
Yeah.
I'm still 150 pounds?
Yeah, I think
You know what I mean? Like
that's another conversation in and of itself. Like, I guess each individual's response to the drugs. Like, you always say this, like some kid can blow up and put, like, for example, well, Dan, it's his first cycle, but like some kid can take, I don't know, 150 milligrams of test and put on 50 pounds, but the next guy has to take 500 and can only put on, I don't know, 10 pounds or something.
Yeah. No, that is and that's the thing where you have to go back to the conversation that we had here originally where it's like, are you maximizing what
Yeah.
you're supposed to be maximizing before you look into the drug concept, just based on the reality of understanding what am I actually capable of, right? At what level am I going to have to push these drugs,
Mhm.
right? To what threshold am I going to have to be comfortable with taking these things to be able to get the desired outcome? Am I going to have to be the guy taking 5,000 milligrams? Well, it's not just, okay, I'm comfortable with this. Now there has to be a conversation about what is your individual resilience to these drugs internally, right? Physiologically, because genetics we all think about is like, building muscle, the way my body
Yeah.
looks, shape, symmetry, these things we think about
Genetics
when
is
we talk
also
about genetics.
internally like,
Yeah, like how is my body going to be able to handle this drug? Like
yeah.
I'm a person where if I wanted to really grow to the level in which I would need to grow to even be competitive in a fucking local, NPC stage, right? Like if I need to put on another whatever 20 pounds, right, of muscle tissue, right, I would have to be, whatever, potentially taking 5,000 milligrams of testosterone, 18 IUs of fucking growth hormone a day, right? And it's like, but now what does that mean though for me? It means that I'm probably going to die of fucking kidney failure, have my blood pressure be through the goddamn roof, my prostate would be swollen to the size of the goddamn sun, right? Like yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that without having all the deleterious outcomes, right? So like
Yeah.
still to this day, I am on blood pressure medication. I am on thyroid medication. Like I am like somebody that never dealt well with the side effects of drugs. But it's also like, hey, listen, everybody in my family has, blood pressure issues. Everybody in my family has thyroid issue, has this health issue, that health issue. A lot of these things I was really predisposed to. And
Yeah.
even through a life of health and fitness, I probably would have led down this path sooner or later anyway, in terms of needing some help or support there, right? Drugs probably exacerbated, or well, let's put it this way: drugs do exacerbate it when I'm on it. Right? I actually have to double my blood pressure medication if my dosage of gear goes up. Right? I have to double my blood pressure medication to keep my blood pressure level stable. Right?
Yeah.
Not low, stable, normal. Right?
Hmm.
So it's like, my body immediately reacts to things that way, in that negative way. So again, now you have to take into consideration, what can my body handle, and am I going to be able to get the result? Not just be comfortable with the idea of like, well, this is a risk, that maybe it takes years off your life down the road. Well, what about right now? How much am I actually going to be able to get out of these drugs without needing to go to the hospital because my blood pressure is now 200 over 100 or whatever it is, because I just kept pushing gear, pushing gear, pushing
Hmm.
gear, pushing gear, right? Like, at what point does that even turn around on you, and the toxicity starts to create more health issues, right? And doesn't allow us to build any more muscle, or puts kind of a governor on how much muscle we can build, because our body's so unhealthy and inflamed, and there's so much oxidative stress going on, right? Like, these drugs are not, even at a lower dosage, like, we still have to take into consideration the things that they're doing internally, right? And it's managing those things as best we can from a healthy health standpoint and safety standpoint, but again, it's one of those things where it's like everybody's availability to manage those things, or to maximize dosages, or it's going to come back to their own individual resilience to these things, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, there's a big conversation there to have. But again, I would always say that, like, hey, listen, again, you have to look at how would I know, right? This is a big thing for me, right? And I've said this to you guys before, I've made posts about it before. Like, to me, understanding what my genetic limitations were didn't come from me sitting around, right, at home,
Hmm.
just screaming and crying and saying, like, I have bad genetics. Like, that
Yeah.
wasn't my thought process at all early on. My thought process early on was, I'm gonna fucking, get a pro card. I'm gonna compete. I'm gonna be a bodybuilder, all this different stuff. And it was like, okay, then I need to eat like a bodybuilder. Okay, I need to train like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to live in a gym like a bodybuilder. Okay, I need to have a job that allows me to do all this stuff like a bodybuilder. I need to sleep like a body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I
Yeah.
need to take drugs like a bodybuilder. So I did all of that, only to be able to turn around in like my early to mid 30s and say, you know what? I did do all of this. This is the outcome that I did get from these drugs, which
Hmm.
was going from whatever 150 pounds, up to 230 pounds or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, I was able to take that path. I did get these results. But again, in order for me to be a good competitor of any sort whatsoever, I would have needed to do the same thing and have the outcome of being 265 pounds
Yeah.
instead of 230 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't get, like, somebody else would have done the same exact thing that I did and end up with that outcome. Or maybe they're fucking 5'6" and 230 is plenty for them to be a formidable, bodybuilder. You know what I mean? For me, that wasn't the case. So again, it's one of those things where it's like, I had to take all those risks. I had to step through all of
To
those
figure it out.
processes to be able to understand that, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not something, it takes so much time, right? And that's one thing that I do want to almost finish off with here. But like,
Yeah.
it takes so much time to be able to get there, right? That it's almost like you have to travel that path and reassess, travel that path and reassess, travel that path and reassess consistently and constantly, because you can't figure that out over a year or
Yeah.
2 years or maybe even 3 years. Because in the thing that's fucked up about this is there is a very real side of steroids that people don't really talk about too much, in terms of the addictive nature of steroids, or the games that it plays as far as your neurological health, your brain functioning in general, right? Like, sometimes we talked about it last night with like birth control for women. Those are hormones, right?
Yeah.
And when you're taking those birth control, they do have an impact on things like, your desire for a particular type of male that you're
Yeah.
interested in, right? Like, these things, it will play with certain things that are in your life that you might not even be considerate of, right?
Mhm.
But wait, what was my point there? My point was,
Addictive nature of drugs.
yeah, like, there's all, but so what happens is, now I'm taking this ride and I'm 2, 3 years into this process, and it's hard for me to actually see, right?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I went from 150 to 170 over this first 2 or 3 year period, right? So in my mind, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting better. People are like, oh, dude, you look jacked. I'm getting stronger, clear as day. So in my mind, it's almost like, okay, well, I just need to keep going. And then it's like 5 years in, you're like, now you're 200 pounds and you're fucking wearing a size extra large. And you're like, I started wearing a size small. It was literally me. My first steroid cycle ever. I was wearing a size small, maybe a size medium t-shirt. And, I actually graded myself in a lot of ways. I kid you not, over what size shirt I was able to fit into. I kid you not. There's a big thing for me for a
Makes
long
sense.
time. Yeah, I went from size small to medium to large to extra large to double XL to triple. And it was one of those things where it's like I really graded myself based on like I was so happy when I
Yeah.
could legitimately fit in a double XL or whatever. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things where it's like those are the little things that you're holding on to as an individual to gauge your process. And it is working in that sense. Right. It's just, it takes a long time to actually be able to come to grips with the reality that it's like, hey, is this working? Yes. But is it working to the extent in which you're going to get the desired outcome that you started for? And it's like, 5 years down the line, you can finally answer that question and say, no, I probably shouldn't be doing this because I'm
Hmm.
probably not going to be able to get that outcome. But again, you are left at that point with a very real outcome that you did ascertain, that you did create for yourself. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Over that time. So again, it's I think the last thing that I kind of, did I make all sense there? Or am I just kind of talking in circles now?
No, you made sense.
So the last thing that I'd really want to touch on here is the fact that, like, I think the most important consideration that you have to make before you start drugs, right, is understanding, right, not just the side effects, not just what you're comfortable with, from a side effect standpoint, or what classification, all this different stuff that we talked about so far. It's the reality that, like, hey, like we already said, all of these things have to be in order first, right? Your,
Hmm.
your your training, your food, your sleep, your lifestyle in general, all of it has to be conducive to specific outcomes, right? But it's also, you can't, nothing trumps time.
Yeah.
Nothing trumps patience, right?
Yeah.
I see so many people, right? Because again, I've been doing this for so long now, right? And like sometimes I sound like I'm just like an old, like I'm trying to play some role as far as an old guy or whatever. It's real, dude. I've been doing this for a very fucking long time. I've seen so many people start, go really hard for a very short window of time, and they're gone. They're
Hmm.
gone. I
Hmm.
just saw some guy on Facebook literally this morning, right? I worked with him in a job. He barely worked out when we worked together. He's a chef, right? So he works crazy hours. He barely worked out, right? All of a sudden, men's physique becomes a thing, right? Literally, this is like at like the whatever, maybe like 3-4 years after men's physique became a thing. Instagram's on the rise. This guy's not doing so. We actually had a restaurant that went under. Right now, he's not doing anything, living with his wife. He's actually buddies with Guy's sister Nina, lives up in that area,
Hmm.
right? So he has this. I think Guy was the one that prepped him for shows, or no, maybe it was his father-in-law or something like that. But bottom line is, he's in this hard, right? And he's going for like 3 years straight hard. So now he's in the gym, right? Kind of discovered it. Wow, I like this. I want to compete. Goes right into competing. Now he's taking drugs because again, he's influenced by a previous bodybuilder, by an IFBB pro at the time, by this fucking world that we live in where social media is exploding. Training is cool, competing is popular, drugs are cool. So he starts taking all these drugs, and guess what? He wins his pro card,
Hmm.
right? So he does all this crazy competing, goes really, really hard, right? Does multiple national level shows. And the dude, for all intents and purposes, again, he was working hard at the time. He had great genetics. He was capable, got this result off of this drug, right? And he wasn't doing everything like as immaculate as you should be. But again, he was capable of doing it, right? He
Hmm.
got the pro card, right? And then from there, it was like he just like he actually came out with another restaurant, had another kid, like he's doing really well from what I see. I just see him on Facebook. This is now what, like 2-3 years later, and
Hmm.
he's got his own restaurant. He's taking pictures with his kids, these holiday pictures and everything, and it's like he looks happy, healthy, but he also looks like a twig compared to the way
Hmm.
they look. He looks like he dropped 30 pounds, 40
Yeah.
pounds. So it's like, again, a guy like that, it's like you hopped in, you did all this stuff, and granted, he was able to get his pro card. Maybe that's worth something to him, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
The way that you value that is completely and totally up to you. And I respect it no matter who you are, because again, that's your choice in life. We all get this opportunity, right? But at the same time, it's one of those things where how many of you are going to take that route, go that hard 2-3 years of your life, and then guess what happens? Life slaps you in the face. First of all, there's no pro card for you. You didn't even take a fucking overall at a show yet, right? But yet you have bills to pay, right? You got to go back to school because you're not sure what you're doing with your life. You have, right, your parents are kicking you out of the house. You got to find somewhere to live, and you're moving in with friends. Like, you have all these different things that are going on in life, right? And it's like all of this stuff was really important to you just 2 or 3 years ago. And now it's kind of like, man, it's like I got to do this. Like this is more important. This is right. I have a client right now that I love to death, really close to him. Right. So I'm not making fun, I'm not trying to say anything bad. And I know you would agree with this, where when we started working together, it was all about competing all the fucking time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was a pretty good competitor from the mindset standpoint, from an actual application standpoint, didn't have great genetics, still doesn't have great genetics, period, right? Probably would have never went pro no matter how much we load him up with. But again, the point here was he was like gung ho with all this shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Competed whatever, like 2 or 3 years in a row. And again, we did pretty well, right? But then it got to a point where it's like, hey, life took over. He went to college. He did get a job right out of college. He came back to me a few years later, like we're working together again now, right? And he went from competing at 150 pounds, right? So you'd be on stage around that 150 mark, right? Off season would probably be like 180 or so. Really hard to get that guy to grow. Now he came to me 240 pounds, completely totally overweight. Like when I say
Yeah.
he looks like he's 3 times of what he used to be, specifically in his stomach, right? So
Yeah.
it's just another example of somebody that got into this. They thought they were ready for all that. They thought they were going to be in this for the long haul, right? They thought they needed all these things to be able to get to X, Y, and Z. And then life happens, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like time cannot be escaped, right? Like time is going to have, like, put in the time first, right? Like, see where this journey takes you potentially, right? Or it's maybe, hey, I have been doing this for a few years. I'm ready. Okay, cool. Hop into this. But again, it doesn't change the amount of time and effort you have to put into it, right? You still might be that guy that's going to get his pro, but still going to take you that 5 years to be able to get there, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to take drugs and get it next year. You're not going to take drugs and get it in 2 years, right? You might have to be taking drugs for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years to be able to get there. And if you don't have that wherewithal, the drugs aren't going to make that difference, right?
Exactly.
Time and patience is everything as it relates to getting the physique that you want, right? Especially as it relates to a competitor getting the placings that they want. Time and the consideration of how much time you're willing to put into something should probably be the first consideration that you're going to make. If I tell you up front, forget about drugs for a second, forget about drugs. If I tell you up front, whether it's a client that wants to get in really good shape or a competitor, right, that's like, hey, cool, I don't care what you're willing to do, but first, are you willing, before we talk about anything else, to put in the next 5 years of your life, the next 6 years of your life, the next 8 years of your life, dedicating it to this one outcome and this one goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if the answer to that is yes, then maybe we can start to talk about all these other things, right? But if you're in it for the short term, you're not in it for the long term, forget about the drugs,
Exactly.
right? For what? For what? You're just
I'm
running, you're
glad.
just trying to sprint to the finish.
I'm glad you mentioned that because then this also reminds me again. I feel like I always go back to the conversation I had with Nicole Sullivan on my podcast, Girl Like a Girl. I haven't posted, but it's still up there. That she's an IFBB figure pro. She's been in the world, like she's been obsessed. And yeah, she has taken PEDs, but now that she, like you mentioned, this is how exactly it went for her. After she turned pro, she like took, time off, went back to school, became a nurse. Now she's a nurse, she's a mom, she's a wife. So like again, life kind of like hit her in the face, not even hit her in the face, but like she opened up her eyes. So like the other whole side of this is that our world, whether it is a lifestyle client just trying to get that edge, whatever, or whether it is a competitor, our world is so small and our view is so like tunneled. Like we don't actually realize how, I don't want to say weird, but like not normal it is to consider, these higher risk things. So I'm not again shitting on PEDs. I take PEDs. So it would be hypocritical, but like the other part of it is that like there's so much in the world. You can't just have tunnel vision, whether it is again for a few years or whether it is for a lot of years. You need to be able to understand, like, yes, you should be able to dedicate like a lot of years to this, but at the same time, it's not everything, because when it doesn't work out, when your genetics suck, when you just fall out of love with it, what's left? Like real life shit is left. Like this isn't real life.
There, good points. Good points.
Good points. Good points. Do you have anything else to add?
No, do you think we touched on everything?
I guess.
I feel like I was a little all over the place. For the
I
record, we
think.
were out until like 10 o'clock last night filming a podcast, and I didn't get to bed until 1 a.m. and I kept waking up like crazy last night. I don't know what happened. but I couldn't breathe last night. Like I couldn't fucking, I had no nothing. So I don't know if it's because we were sitting in Riley's hot ass apartment and like I don't know, something happened as far as my sinuses are concerned. I could not breathe at all when I got
Sinuses.
back last night. Yeah, well, I don't know. I was just fucking clogged up. I had boogers all over the place.
Oh,
Like I couldn't.
really?
It didn't matter what I did. Yeah, I took a Sudafed to try to like clear it up or whatever. Couldn't sleep. So now I'm running off fumes. So if I was all over the place, everybody, I apologize. It's noon and I have 1,000 steps. So that's how slow I've been today.
Yeah, I haven't done steps either. All right. So we'll wrap it up here. Also, if you were, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but if you were listening,
Also, just for the record, Marina's wearing the same clothes as she did last night.
not the same clothes, it's just the same crew neck.
That's the same. Stand up.
Oh yeah, it is the same leggings. You're right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I forgot. I forgot. No, yeah, I just put
went
the
to
same
bed like
shit
this and woke
on.
up.
I literally
Just
just
saying,
woke up.
throwing it out there.
Well, no,
Just
no,
throwing
I
it out there.
changed.
I have a clean shirt on. It's no
I
big deal.
slept in my pajamas and I just put this back on. It was right next to me. I was like, I'll just put this back
Oh,
on.
just
So I was planning
throwing
to
it out
do
there.
steps.
I figured the viewers would want to know. You know what I mean?
I was planning to do steps, and I'm like, ew, it's gonna get dirty. It's already
She
dirty.
she sounds she sounds very defensive right now.
Well, yeah, listen, no, it makes sense. It's girl math.
Oh,
It was already dirty. I'm gonna wake up and do exercise and sweat just a little bit, just a little what's the word? Perspiration?
yeah, perspiration. How's that
Perspiration.
girl math? I'm pretty sure that's dude math. Like that's
That
guy
is
math,
girl
right?
math. It's just the
Maybe
same how you know
maybe
what's girl math? A sports bra, if I sweat in it, it's dirty. If I don't sweat in it, it's clean. But a regular bra that I wear every single day for weeks at a time, it's always clean.
gross.
Anyways, but so I thought I'm gonna sweat in it. It's already dirty. I'm not gonna go get something else dirty. But I haven't even
Do
done
your
my
thing, Chief.
steps.
I'm not judging you.
Sure.
Everybody else is though.
But yeah, thank you everyone. No, what I was gonna say is that last week's episode was uploaded late. There's issues with Buzzsprout. Don't come at me. But you get 2 episodes today. If you're listening on audio. If you're listening on YouTube, or watching on YouTube, you saw last week's episode.
Big deal.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Share with a friend.